Good morning, my name is John Burnett. I work for Hernando County Engineer's Office. I'm a stormwater inspector. Clay Black was scheduled to give this talk, but unfortunately he's not available today, so I've been asked to take his place and to provide this lecture to you. That was a very good reminder. If anybody has cell phones, if you could please turn them off at this time, and we'll get on with the show. All right, so we're here to talk about stormwater in Hernando County. The picture you see there is right on the western edge of Hernando County. That's looking over the salt marsh and at the palm trees down on the coast. Come on. So this is a topographic map of Hernando County, and you can see that on the left-hand side we have the coast, and then you see color changes that reflect changes in elevation as we go across the county. Down the middle of the county you see all the brown and the orange marks. Those represent the elevations that show the Brooksville Ridge, which is one of the major geographical features for Hernando County. So the county is 473 square miles, about 18 miles north to south and 38 miles east to west. The highest elevation is Chinsigat Hill, which is 270 feet. And I don't know whether I can show on here. Yes, okay, so this is Chinsigat Hill right here, which is kind of strange because it's an outlier from the main ridge, but it's highest point in elevation in the county. So when we talk about stormwater, we're dealing with elevation and we're dealing with rainfall. Rainfall is where we get all of our water for our drinking water in Hernando County. And the county falls within the normal sort of Florida pattern. We have a dry season at the beginning of the year and a wet season in the middle of the year. So as you can see there, normal rainfall between probably May 1st and through October, November. That's the hurricane season, which obviously produces our major rain events, but otherwise that's our normal maximum rainfall where we get all the thunderstorms and that type of thing. And then the rest of the year we get whatever comes from the systems that come down from up north, the continental rainfall systems. So if you look at the sort of rainfall history of Hernando County, you can see that every single year we see a couple of peaks or higher events in the middle of the year, and then it goes down. But if you look across all of the lines there, you'll see that we'll very rarely get any rain that's more than 12 inches in any of the major events. But if we look a little bit more closely at a couple of years, 1956 to 1961, if you see there, each of the sort of main divisions is a year. So in 58 and 59, we had very, very heavy rains for all of the year. And if you look, you'll see that most months exceeded 3 inches of rain. When we have those type of conditions, that's where we got our highest rainfall that was ever recorded in Hernando County in 1 year, 80.17 inches. Our normal rainfall is about 53 inches, 54 inches in a year. If we look on the other side there, on the right-hand side, you'll see the graph that shows 2000, 2001, and you'll see that we're very, very lucky if we even get an inch for every month in the year. And then in the middle of the year, we had some fairly heavy rains, but the total for the whole year only got to 38 inches of rain. So that kind of gives you the high and the low of rainfall that we can expect within the county. When things go kind of wet for us, 2004 we had 3 tropical storms that crossed the county, Francis and Jean, and I think the remnants of Charlie came through earlier in that year. But Francis and Jean came very close together in that summer and resulted in some major flooding. The home that you see there on the top is just on the northeast side of Brooksville, in an area near Wade Prairie and Blue Sink. And that area takes all the water from the city of Brooksville and a fairly large area around about it. And so this family saw water coming to them from the back of the house, and it just kept coming and coming. Eventually, it went over the windowsills of that home. So 2004 was a bad year for that family. The home they were bought out by the Hernando County and the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and so at least they got some compensation, and that property is now set aside for stormwater storage. The bottom picture there is much more recent, 2012 Tropical Storm Debbie, and that's actually a part of Spring Hill. And I don't know whether you can see, but if I bring you can see a brown line along the stucco of this house here. That's a scum line from the flooding. And down here, you can see wet bricks. And so this house had enough water to get up to about here on the front door. So the house was completely inundated. Both of those homes were, and another couple of homes in that area. So what it tells us is it really doesn't matter where you are in the county. It doesn't matter whether you're near the coast or up in the hills. There's always a possibility that you might be affected by stormwater flooding. This is Town in 1960 as the result of the rainfall in that year. Hurricane Donna came later in the year, but there were some very, very heavy rains at the beginning of the year that actually caused the flooding. But by Donna, it was still high. So it took a long time for that water level to go down. This is a detail of what our new flood maps look like. They're very, very detailed. They're based on aerial photography. And so you can actually see each of the structures. And then the floodplain is marked in the blue line with the polka dots. And if any of you want me to find out where you live or show you where the floodplains are, come and get a card from me at the end of the show, and I'll be more than happy to tell you how to contact me, and we can take a look and see where the floodplain is adjacent to your properties. So we know that we have topography and rainfall, and the water runs across the landscape. And when it does that, water is the sort of universal solvent, and it picks up a lot of various other things when it flows across the landscape. So chemicals and fertilizer and things that we put on our soil are picked up by the water as it flows, and any trash and debris and anything else that is in the water path is picked up and is carried with the water. And really, that ends up as one of our major sources of water pollution. And later on, I'll talk about more specifically a thing called non-point source pollution, which means that it comes from basically a diffuse area across the landscape. The water in the county is safe to drink regardless of what it picks up, because it's treated and also filtered by the soil. So even if you're on a well, you have a very good chance of getting very clean water. If you do have a well, you're entitled to have that water tested by the health department, and you can do that once a year per household that's on a well. So we talked a little bit about non-point source pollution. Non-point source affects drinking water, recreational water, fishery water, and wildlife. and that's a satellite picture of Florida, and you can see all the little circular depressions that are full of water, and that's very common with our landscape. So as the water comes across the surface of the land, it picks up a number of different chemicals and various other trash and debris. And when that gets to a water body, very often it results in cloudiness in the water, which we call turbidity, which results in low visibility, and that can impair some animals from being able to find their food. Also, when we get high nutrients, we get algal blooms in our water, and that causes the water to turn green. It lowers the amount of oxygen available in the water, and that results in fish kills. We also get heavy metals and other types of bacteria that can be a health risk. So when water goes across the landscape, it doesn't always reach a pond or stream. In some parts of Florida, it actually sinks into the ground directly. And this is called a swallet, or sinking stream. And this is at Peck Sink, which is just to the southwest of the city of Brooksville on Wisconsin Road. And in this location, the water goes directly into the ground. Now, I was very lucky to be able to take this photograph back in 2005. If we went there today, it wouldn't actually look like that, because as the water goes across that edge of sand, it erodes. And so now what we have is a fairly well-defined stream that sinks back up into the floodplain. And the actual area where this hole is now just an area of sand. But when we get a big storm, it fills up with water, and you can see a circular motion as the water dissipates through the sand and goes directly into the aquifer. So the big concern here is that water hasn't been treated at all, and it's going directly down into our groundwater, which is the aquifer, which is where we get our drinking water. Some parts of Florida, and in particular in Hernando County, we have very large caverns underneath the ground. This is the Dipolder Cave, which is located just south of State Road 50, near its intersection with Highway 19, in the Boy Scouts reservation. We're very lucky that the Boy Scout reservation is an area where there's been very little development, and full water treatment through percolation can take place. But these gentlemen are actually swimming in your drinking water. So if we go to the next slide, the next time you see that water is when it comes out at the spring or out of your faucet. So now let's talk a little bit about regulations that affect water quality. In 1972, the federal government put out the Clean Water Act, and part of that was changed in 1990 to be the NPDES Stormwater Program. Now, NPDES is an acronym that only the federal government could have come up with. It's the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. And it affects Hernando County because we have to be certified under that system for our municipal separate storm sewer system, or our MS4. So everywhere that we have water flowing along the edge of the road, or in county right-of-way, or in areas that are owned by the county, some of our ponds and some of our lakes, that's part of our county responsibility to maintain that as a clean water system. You can also see there that in 2000, the Phase 2 program started. We participate in that Phase 2 program, but also it's divided into treatments of construction sites of 1 acre or more. They are required to get a permit from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection that qualifies them under the federal government's NPDES program. Also, industrial activities and marinas and any other industries that involve hazardous waste or waste that needs to be controlled also have permitting specific to their industry that is also part of the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. So Hernando County's Public Works Department has our Stormwater division included in it as part of our engineering department, but also maintenance portion of that is done predominantly by our Department of Public Works. But the County Engineer's Office reviews all new development, private and public, and makes sure that they conform to the county's engineering requirements. And those engineering requirements reflect back onto the Clean Water Act and the requirements of the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, in that whatever treatment, whatever impervious area is created on a property that increases runoff, that runoff needs to be treated before it leaves the property, and it can't leave the property in any greater amount than it originally did when it was in its natural condition. So that's why all commercial development has to have retention ponds and storage ponds, and the same kind of thing happens with all of the subdivisions. Any hard impervious areas create more runoff because the water can't percolate in, so the water leaves the hard surfaces and goes into our streams and our ditches and drainage swales. We evaluate the adequacy of the county's infrastructure to carry that water, and we make improvements to that from time to time. We maintain compliance with the Clean Water Act requirements for our own stormwater system, and we respond to problems within that drainage system and maintain it in a state that stops impacts to adjacent properties. We have an inventory of all stormwater assets, and we support all the other county departments. We also form, as I said, a repository for the stormwater floodplain information, and general public can come to our office and we'll help them with any of their inquiries. So, National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. What do we have to do to meet our requirements? Well, one of the requirements is what we're doing right here, public education and outreach. We also, when we're doing projects, we invite the public to participate and provide input on our projects. And we also do illicit discharge detection and elimination. So if somebody sees somebody dumping things in our stormwater system that should not be there, they're encouraged to call the county and we'll investigate. And we also look at water quality within our own system, and if we see problems, then we'll investigate and find out where the problems are and try and remove those. We control site runoff from construction sites. Hernando County, in our stormwater protection ordinance, requires all construction sites, even if they're less than 1 acre. So we take the requirements from the federal government and make them a little bit more stringent to make sure that we don't have problems. Because where we have a lot of people living close together, even one construction site can cause issues for the neighbors and for the stormwater system that's attached to it. We look at post-construction runoff control. We inspect most stormwater systems annually and maintain them in the way that they're supposed to be. And we do pollution prevention and good housekeeping within the county. So, obviously, you don't want to swim in the water that's got all those cigarette butts and plastic bottles and other things in there. So, public education and outreach is a major part of what we do, and trying to talk to people and remind them that whatever they put in the water or whatever is exposed to rainwater ends up at one point, sooner or later, in our springs. And one of the sad things that we have to say is that Weeki Wachee Spring is not as pristine as it used to be. We have a problem with that water body with too many nitrates, too much fertilizer, if you like, that's got into our groundwater, and now it's fertilizing the spring and the river that comes from the spring, and we're getting algae growth and things like that that shouldn't be there. So we're going to start a big project fairly soon that will involve all stakeholders within the county. We already have a fertilizer ordinance in place, but we're going to start talking with our agricultural partners and also with the people in Pasco County that live within the spring shed that provides water to Weeki Wachee Spring. And I'll talk about that in a little bit in a few minutes. So we talk about stormwater projects. When we do a stormwater project, we very often have public meetings, invite people to come together, tell them about the project and get their input, and try and make sure that when we complete the project that the neighbors are happy with what we're doing and that they see a benefit from it. We have a number of projects that are volunteer organizations. We have an Adopt a Road program which picks up trash within the roadways, some of the major roadways and some of the local roadways. We have a storm drain stenciling program, coastal cleanup program, and lake watch program. So here's the Adopt a Road. If you undertake to maintain an area of road for a period of time, we'll put up a sign that recognizes the work that you're doing to assist the county. And we help you by providing you with bags and traffic shirts to wear while you're doing it to make sure that you're safe and visible within the right-of-way. And we'll pick up all the trash that you collect with a special pickup run from our department. The stenciling program is done to remind people that when the water goes into certain drains, it goes directly into a water body, and those water bodies are vital to our drainage system and to our natural area. And so we remind people that if you can stop putting pollution through those drains, then you'll do a benefit to everybody. The program's available to any group that wants to come and spend some time, and we'll provide you with the stencils and the paint and that type of thing, and instruct you how to mark the drains that need to be done. Coastal Cleanup is a national event that's done under a number of different organizations. Our coastal cleanups are usually done later in the year, in the fall, towards the end of the rainy season. And basically we get people to go out along the coast and to help us to pick up whatever plastic and styrofoam and all the other things that we see along the side of the road. Of course, these people would not have a job if we all kept our trash and brought it home and put it out with our normal trash. So when you see people throwing stuff out the window, please remind them that they should turn up for the coastal cleanup and help pick it up later. One of the last projects that we do is the Lake Watch program. Florida Lake Watch is done by IFAS from the University of Florida, and they collect information from volunteers who collect water samples and then process the water samples so that they have basically do an algae count for each time they do observation. And they also provide water samples to the university that are studied to try and measure nitrates, phosphates, and some of the other major water pollutants. And that just gives us a background data so that if we did have a problem with a piece of water body, we could look and see what it should be normally, so that we can determine how much damage was done, and the perpetrator would then be required to meet the cleanup standards to the prior levels of water quality. Some people think that dumping oil into a storm drain is a good thing to do. I'm afraid they're very, very wrong. Storm drains do not clean oil up. In fact, all they do is create a pocket to hold it until the rain comes along, and then the rain will distribute it throughout our drainage system. So if you see people dumping oil into a storm drain, please tell them to stop, and if they won't, then call the county, either to our code enforcement people or to county engineer's office or public works, and we'll send somebody out to do a cleanup there. You can see what the inlet looks like at the bottom left, and there's an oil pan there that somebody dumped in the structure. But then we have to get a crane to lift the top off the structure, which is what it looks like in the top right. And you can see that there are some oil absorbent booms that have been put in there to soak up the oil. And the white material there is also oil absorbent. And so they'll clean that whole structure and remove all of that oil to the landfill where it's disposed of correctly. But it becomes a major problem because that's a source that will affect that section of our storm drain. So that will actually end up being cleaned off with steam hose and detergent so that we can clean that structure properly. This is the Stormwater Protection Ordinance, Hernando 2006-10, and it defines discharge as any release, spilling, leaking, seeping, pouring, emitting, emptying, or dumping of any substance or material other than rainwater. An illicit connection is anybody who's putting those things into the MS4 that has not been authorized to do it. And an illicit discharge is any direct or indirect discharge to the county's municipal separate storm sewer system that is not composed entirely of stormwater, unless exempt. And there are a few things that are exempt. One is if you have a fire and there's a lot of water coming from fire hoses and that type of thing. Dumping your pool onto your grass is permitted, but dumping from the pool directly into a storm drain is not permitted, because the grass and the soil beneath it actually acts as a filter, whereas when you dump it straight into the storm sewer system, then it's got chlorine and other things in it that shouldn't be in our system. So that's one of the things that's definitely not allowed. And anybody who's responsible for discharging into the storm sewer system has the possibility of being fined and paying back damages to correct the problem. And we enforce it through our code enforcement department, and any fines or whatever that can be levied through the court system. So there's some fairly robust controls on pollution of stormwater. Then we come to construction industry. The construction industry has a whole set of regulations that are specific to it under the National Pollution Discharge and Elimination System. And each contractor is required to apply for a permit, and they adopt the requirements for the appropriate disposal of things within their construction site, so that anything that's an illicit discharge comes back to them and they're responsible for cleaning it up. So some of the things there, you see at the bottom it says dirt stockpiles. One of the problems that we have sometimes during the summer, it's so dry that they dry out, and the next thing we have a stormy day with a lot of wind, and the wind blows the dirt out of the site and onto the road. So any time that we have silt or sediment leaving a construction site, that is a violation of the National Pollution Discharge and Elimination System, and the contractor is required to stop it immediately and control those stockpiles. So what they should really be doing, if they're not being used, they should be grassed over or covered or treated with a chemical that stops them from being able to be eroded by wind. Also, anything that's exposed for any length of time can also be treated to make sure that it doesn't cause runoff problems. But ideally it should be grassed as soon as it's at the final grade. There's a silt fence that's in place around the perimeter of a site. So anywhere that stormwater could run off that site and transport sediment and silt, that's where that silt fence is up to prevent, and it should be trenched into the ground to stop the sediment from leaving the site. And we inspect sites periodically to make sure that they're in compliance. So here's a site, if we look at the top left picture, where the silt fence is down and you can see the soil and sediment leaving the site. That is a violation of the permit and should be remediated immediately, and we can get the contractor to come out there and clean the street and the sidewalk to get all the dirt back in the site. The bottom picture is a little bit more difficult to understand what's going on. You can see a car wheel along the very top edge of the picture, and underneath it there's a storm drain, and on this side of the storm drain you can see a yellow material. That's actually a silt and sediment barrier that's up across a creek or something, and that's designed to control sediment and to keep it closer to the construction site. This is what it should look like when it's finished. This is a stormwater mitigation pond. The sides of the pond are grassed so they don't erode, but the bottom of the pond is kept as open sand that allows the water to percolate through it to the maximum rate. And that's how it should be. Over time that may become covered in grass, and that's not altogether a bad thing, but initially when they complete construction it's supposed to be clear of grass. The top picture is a picture of a weir or a control structure. The site would be on the left-hand side of the picture where you see the cattails. That's the stormwater pond. And in a storm, when the water comes up high enough, the first thing it encounters is that there's a board in front of the weir that forces the water to go down underneath the board. And that traps all of the anything that's suspended along the surface of the water gets trapped and doesn't flow directly out of the site. So that means any oils or grease that floats on the surface is contained within the site. And the rest of the stormwater can go below the board, through the weir, and out into the normal discharge stream system. The picture at the bottom is a weir that's actually collapsed completely because it's been eroded. If I can, let me see if I can get that. Where's my pointer? Here it is here. Okay. This structure here is the concrete wall, and this is actually the weir shape here, and you can see that it's fallen completely flat. And then this is where erosion is taking place here. The water is pouring over that and through the hole and out, and you can see all this sediment here that's escaping from the site. So this is a pretty major violation of probably not so much construction, but maintenance of the site and maintenance of the stormwater facility. So we can go back on the owner and get them to fix it if we need to, or if it's ours, and it's definitely not ours, it was a private site, we'd get them to repair it. All right, so when you have chemicals or oils or grease or anything like that, the top row of pictures show you how it should be contained. In drums, underneath a roof, so you don't get rainwater falling on it, or collected in a pan and disposed of correctly, or if there's a spill, cleaned up with an absorbent material and then shoveled into a bag and disposed of, or contained by the appropriate form of boom or mat or whatever, and then that is cleaned up and disposed of correctly. All of the pictures on the bottom show things that should not happen. Chemical drums exposed to rainwater, discharge from underneath the car, it's not being collected, it's just going on the ground, a dumpster that's leaking, and then I don't know what that last picture is. It looks like my son's kitchen after a party or something, but no, that's definitely chemicals and things that shouldn't be there. So something that's not right. So all of those things on the bottom need to be remedied in some way. And again, these are all things that should be inspected and corrected. At the waste transfer stations throughout the county, you can dispose of household hazardous waste, which also includes medication. It's very important that we don't put prescribed medications into our water supply. Don't put them in your septic system. Bring them to the waste transfer station and they're collected in a drum. You have to open your container, dump all the pills in, and I think there's either gasoline or something like that in there that dissolves them, and then that particular material is taken away and disposed of correctly. Very, very important that we don't put medications into our septic systems or into our waste stream, because when they get out, they can actually have a very bad effect on fish and on the natural areas. So, what causes or what happens when we get too much pollution? If you over-fertilize, whatever your grass doesn't use and can't use goes through the root systems of your grass and then goes into groundwater, and then eventually it comes out later on as polluted water through our spring system. But the grass can only take a certain amount, and if you over-fertilize, you're wasting your money because the grass can't use it. So you fertilize your grass at the appropriate time with the appropriate amount of fertilizer, and if you need any guidance for that, you can contact the County Extension Office, and they can provide you with assistance through their Master Gardener program with regard to when the appropriate time is to fertilize your yard. Some shrubs and flowers require to be fertilized at different times, and they can help you with all of that. But when the surface water bodies become polluted, then it results in fish kills, algae blooms, dissolved oxygen problems, and limited recreational use. And also affects your wallet because you're spending unnecessary money on fertilizer and wasting water to fertilize or to water it in, and also health problems from the polluted water supply. So, what does the stormwater drainage system consist of? We've got a bunch of different pictures here. Roadside swales in the top left picture. So where the water comes off the road, it goes across a grassed area to a low point, and then it flows along some kind of a ditch system there, and eventually becomes part of a drainage ditch, which is in the bottom left. Those drainage ditches usually end up at some kind of a pond or control structure or some kind of collecting area. The control structures are pictured up there in the top right picture. And then pipes underneath the road, those are all part of our stormwater system. So when you see people washing their car, say on the concrete driveway, and all the suds are going down into the road, one of the things to do is to ask them to put the car on the grass, wash the car so the suds go on the grass, and the grass absorbs the suds and the water and starts the treatment system right there. So grass and sand and the soil is the first step in our pollution treatment system. It helps to remove and control and stop all of those nutrients and chemicals from going into our water supply. The roadside pipes, if they get clogged up, can cause problems. If you see a pipe that's constricted, you can call our office and we'll send somebody out to clean it out. There we are doing maintenance and regrading in the top left picture there, trying to put down some new grass there and regrade the swales. The bottom left there, removing pipes that have become old and corroded and they need to be replaced occasionally. Top right is maintenance of the drainage system, digging out all of the transported mucks and sediments that collect at various parts of our drainage system, and those are cleaned out usually at the beginning and the end of the rainy season and transported to our waste disposal systems. Maintenance, repair of a weir structure. That was kind of interesting. That weir structure is way back in the middle of nowhere out in Ridge Manor, and somebody decided to try out a sledgehammer on it and basically knocked it down all 3 rows of concrete blocks. I don't know why. I don't know what their point was, but luckily we found out where it was and restored it to what it should have been. These stormwater systems have control elevations that stop flooding from affecting downstream properties, and it's essential that they be maintained at their designed elevations. So that's part of our project as well. These are some projects that we undertook to improve water quality. The top one is a stormwater pond at Peck Sink. What we take is the stream that contains runoff from the city of Brooksville and from State Road 50 and US Highway 41, direct it into a stilling basin, which you see there, where the water has a chance to sit and let all the sediments settle out. And from there, the water goes into a man-made marsh system where the plants have an opportunity to help to remove toxins from the water. From there, it goes directly to that low point that we showed you in one of the earlier pictures where the water was going directly into the aquifer. So now that system does have treatment before it goes directly into the aquifer. The Dawson Pond at the bottom left is in the city of Brooksville on Martin Luther King. And again, it's a stormwater basin that's designed to collect stormwater, allow it to sit and to have the sediments settle out without traveling further down through the system. And then we can go in there and clean those out more readily. High Point Stormwater Pond, again, that was dug out and increased in size to improve the water quality treatment at that site. So that kind of gets towards the end of the project or this talk today, and I'll entertain any questions that you may have had in the presentation. Any questions?
What kind of budget do you have for the actual maintenance of the stormwater system?
That budget is collected through our through ad valorem taxation, and there's a millage rate that applies for each department within the county. I think I could probably get you the numbers. I'm not sure what they are right off the top of my head, but we have a fairly large budget for stormwater. It's actually collected as a municipal service taxing unit that's separate from the normal ad valorem things, and that fee is in particular as a result of that National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, because that was an unfunded mandate that came to us from the state. So we had to set up a system that allows us to collect funding to administer the system correctly. I can get you the numbers though if you need them. Anything else? Yes?
I have a question. Okay, so if a construction company needs to have a permit there's not allowed to be any more runoff than what would normally have occurred in the case of rain or something, but obviously if there's a flood from a hurricane or from
Sure.
too much rain, and it doesn't run off of the property and the home becomes flooded like it did in
Yes.
the house, what would the construction, would he need a special permit to get it off the property?
No. That flooding is because that home was not built in a very good location. It's a natural depression. Some of the earlier subdivisions that were built had almost no controlling regulations on them at all. That particular one is Wikiwachi Woodlands, which is off US Highway 19, one of the very first subdivisions in the county. And there was no provision at all made for any stormwater flow within the subdivision. So later on, when we come to, say, look at Spring Hill when it was constructed by the Deltona Corporation, if you look at any of the plats or deeds for property in any of the Spring Hill units, you'll see that there's a 5-foot side yard easement for drainage and utilities. And that's to allow us to put in a swale or some way to allow us to move the water to where it's supposed to go without impinging on the neighbors in the area. But unfortunately, in those subdivisions that did not make any provision, it's really kind of up to the homeowner to make sure that they maintain the grading in their yard so that when the water comes off the roof, it flows away from the house and flows out to the road. These homes are at the very, very bottom of that system. So it goes into the road, follows the road system around, and ends up at that low point and fills that low point up with water. So those homes that were affected, one in particular was acquired by the county, and we will put in a stormwater pond there. However, the pond probably will not be big enough to deal with the problem for the whole area. So it's one of those ways where now we wait for the next home to be impacted adversely, and then if we can mitigate by acquiring the structure, we will, and that improves, and eventually we'll have enough of a stormwater pond that it'll stop the homes from flooding. But some of the ones in that area have water that basically flows downhill from neighbors that are higher than they are and comes directly to their back doors, and they have to kind of swale it around the home and do whatever they can to stop it from coming in. The county doesn't have any responsibility for those kind of areas. If you plat a lot, you have the right to construct on it by Florida law. Whether you construct in such a way that your home is safe and outside, the other thing, of course, now the Florida Building Code requires the grading to be done, and we do inspect grading at the beginning of construction. But if you want to build on a piece of land, we can't stop you. Anything else?
Since the county can go on a private property and mow the grass when it gets too high, why can't they go on private property and clean drainage ditches?
All right. It depends where the home is as to whether we can go in there and do things. If it's within a community, I believe that our code compliance officers can require somebody upon notice to cut their lawn to avoid, problems when it gets too high. If they don't cut their lawn, then code enforcement will get somebody to do it, and it will be charged to the property owner. When it comes to the drainage side of things, our regulation system hasn't got that far yet. At some point, it's possible that there may be a floodplain ordinance that will require homeowners to maintain the flow or the transport of water across your property, essentially. If your property is part of a natural system, then we would require the owner of the property to maintain it appropriately, with the same idea that if you don't, then you'd cause adverse impacts on your neighbors, and we'd have to take care of it.
What is the chance of that being accomplished?
Given the way our board is right now, they're fairly conservative, and generally they don't want to impinge on homeowners' rights. And so I would say right now the chances are fairly limited. However, we haven't had a major storm event in a long time. And I think if we were to have a major storm event and there were to be a lot of flooding damage caused by debris and things that were kind of coming through the stormwater system, then there's a possibility that you might be able to make a forceful point that if people had been maintaining their system and removing these things from the floodway and from the drainage system, then we wouldn't have had these problems. Unfortunately, until it happens in such a way that it causes the county to have to spend money. So for instance, supposing we had a lot of debris that went through a system and clogged a road culvert and the road ended up getting washed out, that's something that the county might be more likely to take action with. It's one of those things that's kind of out there. The county does not have a budget to maintain every single part of the stormwater flow system. We don't maintain streams that are out in the countryside, but that's part of our stormwater conveyance. So it's kind of, difficult right now.